Thank You for Smoking is a 2005 American satirical black comedy film written and directed by Jason Reitman, starring Aaron Eckhart, Maria Bello, Katie Holmes, David Koechner, William H. Macy, J.K. Simmons, and more.
I don't have an MD or law degree. I have a bachelor's in kicking butt and taking names. I get paid to talk.
What do you talk about?
I speak on behalf of cigarettes.
My mommy says that cigarettes kill.
Now, is your mommy a doctor?
No.
Well, she doesn't exactly sound like a credible expert now, does she?
Yeah.
We call ourselves the Mod Squad. MOD, Merchants of Death. We're lobbyists for the tobacco, alcohol, and firearms industries. How many alcohol-related deaths a year?
Well, does that...
100,000? That's what, 270 a day? A tragedy.
Smoke 'em if you got 'em, because we're back for another episode of The Cult of Films. I'm John, the host, and I'm joined once again by the illustrious Coleman Yeti.
Thanks for having me, John. I'll try to refrain from smoking throughout this podcast.
Coleman, why are we talking about 2005's Thank You for Smoking?
We're talking about this movie because it's one of my absolute favorite movies, like top 2 or 3 of all time.
Ooh.
It shows kind of the darker sides of Washington and what happens with lobbyists in Washington. And the character is this lovable scumbag who you can't help but just feel for and like throughout the movie, despite the terrible things he's doing, trying to fool the American public into believing smoking is fine. And you just like him so much.
This is like watching 90 minutes of if Kellyanne Conway was actually good at her job. This is done in a way that is so goddamn entertaining. And like you said, this is one of your favorite films of all time. When this came out, this blew my face off. I thought this was such a great film. And it was one of those that only got better with time and got better with the more I dug into it. Because just walking into it kind of blind, it didn't have a huge marketing campaign or anything. I don't even know why I took a chance on this film when it came out, but you know, when I left the theater, I was just like, whoa, that was really something different. As far as a comedy went, it was so smart, so layered, and then, you know, digging into it, finding out so much more, and then you realize like who it was done by. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, we're not smoking tonight. Like the movie, you don't find a single cigarette in the film, which is also one of my favorite things about it, but we are partaking. Coleman,
well, tonight I will be drinking The Abyss by Deschutes. Ooh. It's an 11.1% Imperial Stout. It is delicious, and I will be enjoying it out of my lovely barrel-aged Unicorn Tears glass from Fremont Brewing.
Jeez. So, yeah, we might be losing Coleman 10 minutes into this, but that's okay. I've seen the movie a bunch. I am drinking it's quite hot here, even though we're in Washington State, but I have an Icicle Brewing Enchantment's Hazy IPA. This thing is a 6.7%er. It's one of their Enchantment series. I think this one's the third one, so I got a couple of bomber cans of this. I am just on such a hazy IPA kick lately, and this one is pretty delicious as well. It's not as hazy as the ones that I've been drinking, but it's still, you know, fantastic. So, l'chaim, sir.
Cheers. Lighter than the tar I'm drinking right now.
Mm-hmm. Man, yeah, look at that. Look at that sip. Oh, I am so jealous. That looks fantastic.
Oh, yeah. This is the good stuff right there.
Jeez, it looks like a fishbowl of motor oil. I love it. Let's go back. Let's kind of restart and talk about where this film came from. Well, it's an adaptation of a satirical novel from Christopher Buckley. Christopher Buckley is one of those retired kind of .coms, or, you know, he just has like a really powerful family in the industry, but he kind of left that corporate life to write about it, and I think his novels do really well. This is the only one so far in Thank You for Smoking that's been made into a feature film, but I think there is actually 2 more of his novels coming down the pike. And a person that they picked to helm this, kind of like I mean, you were here with me when we talked about Choke. Clark Gregg, that was his debut film. This is Jason Reitman's first film, and Jason Reitman, you know, is the son of Ivan Reitman, did classics like all through his career. The big one being, you know, the crown jewel of Ivan Reitman's career is Ghostbusters, of course, but Jason Reitman 2005 just came out of nowhere with this film, and not only did he direct it, and it's just like, oh, I'm a first-time director. No, he wrote it to, well, he adapted it to the screen because it is from a novel. But I mean, I was just like blown away. Like, I talk about a lot of first features from a lot of more well-known filmmakers, but I mean, this is as strong of an outing as I think I've seen for any other filmmaker.
I didn't realize who directed the movie. I pay attention more to the stories, which is why I love this. And if he wrote it or adapted it, it was so well done. It's one of the reasons I love this movie, because it's so dialogue heavy, but it all really drives the story, and it's written so well. The way that they have this guy spin everything, the arguments that he makes throughout. So well done, sir, for your first outing.
Sir Jason Reitman. Aaron Sorkin level dialogue, like the Social Network era, everything. Like, it's so fast and quippy. And like you said, there's so much put on the dialogue in this. It's not a big special effects extravaganza. It's people sitting talking in rooms, or, sitting talking to audiences, trying to convince the greater population of this horrible thing is actually okay. And for him to pull that off in the writing is absolutely fantastic. He cut his teeth on this, and then he'd follow this up the next year with Juno, and then Up in the Air like a couple years later, and he went on to get like multiple Academy Award nominations for both of those films. But this is the film I feel is his strongest feature.
Oh, for sure. This would be my favorite of the three, certainly. And again, it's just the dialogue, just how well it was written, just in that all of these arguments had to be, the arguments that the main character makes had to be adapted for this movie. And they're all really good, compelling arguments that he makes. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't convince you, and that's not his job, and we'll talk about that more, I'm sure. But he doesn't convince you that cigarettes are bad. He just changes the topic enough that you're talking about something else. And then people are left flustered with what just happened to them, because they're no longer having the conversation that they were trying to have.
For as much credit as I give the film is shot super stylized. It has a lot of quick cuts. It has a lot of like contrast filter. All the contrast feels like it's cranked way up, especially when they're in like the boardroom meetings and stuff. Like, J.K. Simmons is an animated person anyway, so whenever he's like interacting with Nick and Naylor and they're like going back and forth, everything seems just like super bright, and like the colors kind of bleeding at the edges. It's almost overblown, and it's like drowned out in sepia. And saw it the first time, I'm like, oh, this is stylized like a Snatch or something like that, like a Guy Ritchie film, and I was really digging it. But now looking at it, so many years after, 15 years after this thing was released, Jason Reitman shows his like amateurish filmmaking at that point, where he's just like, I'm just gonna, this is a movie about, people talking in rooms to each other. How can I make that stylized? And so he got really tricky with some of the scenes. Some of them were really cool and effective. Like, every time that he shot Nick on like a talk show, they used that like grainy old like 90s like Sally Jessy Raphael like camera work. Or there's even that when he is getting attacked and he has that like fever dream sequence, and everything, like he's escaping the smoking building, everything is like super rainy looking. So there is times in the film where his diversity and different shot composition kind of worked for me, but it does feel a little frenetic and amateurish to me. But was that even a problem for you?
No, not at all. And I don't pay as much attention to the stylistic things as you do, but since you pointed that out and looking at it, I feel like it really enhanced the movie.
Sure.
Because of the subject matter, because it was cigarettes, because you are looking at tobacco companies and these old school tobacco guys, that it's showing their environment. You're looking at the Marlboro Man and his house, and it's showing the environment that he lives in. And so I feel like those notes really added to the film, and I think that it enhances the fact that it's cigarettes. If you think about old smoky rooms and everything is covered in blue smoke, and there's smoke on the windows and the walls and everything else. I think that this just really enhanced the subject matter. But until you pointed it out, I never realized nobody ever smoked in the movie.
Yeah. So one of my favorite parts about this, cigarettes is just the MacGuffin, right? It could be, it really could have been anything. So it's not like they were trying to glamorize it at all. They talk about smoking constantly. And as an ex-smoker, it even still kind of piqued my interest. Like, oh God, they're talking about cigarettes a lot. What? I could really go outside right now. But it doesn't romanticize smoking at all. Or when it does, like when he's meeting with Rob Lowe, the fancy blood-sucking movie producer. It's his job to romanticize, smoking and all that. So I like that. And you do make a good point, because yes, it's over stylized in my opinion in certain points, but it is like tobacco rooms, and I feel like if you have smoked, it always the nicotine stain, and so when everything that is featured with big tobacco, like when he's in the boardrooms or when he's like hanging out with Robert Duvall, it does have that sepia stain on it, so it's almost like a nicotine stain on it. So that's actually a pretty good point.
Despite the fact that it's a modern movie, you're talking about old school mentalities surrounding tobacco. This
film was made on a $10 million budget, which is a pretty good budget for a first feature from a director. I mean, Jason Reitman has a little bit of pedigree, and he was working before he got handed his first feature film. So I can understand that, he had a little bit of a budget to make this. It only made $39 million, which it's not, you can't say it was a box office bomb. It made, 3 times its budget, so it did a little better in the industry than breaking even. Why do you think people didn't really respond to this as much as they responded to his next 2 features like Juno and Up in the Air, which made in the hundreds of millions?
Possibly the subject matter is part of it. Possibly just how much went towards actually promoting the movie. Juno, I feel like, had a lot of promotion. The subject matters, the teen pregnant girl, I think it just attracted a lot more people. Just the title, Thank You for Smoking, may scare a lot of people away in itself. And people didn't really know what it was. I didn't know what it was until I watched it. I had no idea. And this is just another one of those movies that I just kind of would watch every movie that I could get my hands on and go, oh, what is this? And watched it and went, this is fucking amazing. Right. I love this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you nailed it too with the whole Juno thing, because I think Juno was like the beginning of that movement. I think that was like right when after Juno came out, they, that whole 16 pregnant thing just like took over the airwaves, and that kind of culture came with that, where this was, it had Christopher Buckley. It was a well-known, satirical novelist, but he was no Chuck Palahniuk. He was no, Stephen King or anything. So I don't think he had that name recognition where you're just like, oh, we got to go see a Christopher Buckley movie adaptation. Like, we got to go run out and throw money at this. That's why I think this had such a better afterlife after it came out, and such a, it crushed in home media sales. This was just like, because it was like you said, it was like a word of mouth thing. It's like, wait, what is this? Thank You for Smoking. It was almost like I put it akin to like Burn After Reading from the Coen brothers, where but that had the director pedigree name recognition attached to it, where this didn't. It was in that same style. So it was like, oh, if you're watching Snatch or Burn After Reading, you'd probably like this film, and I think you'd be right.
Yeah.
I think we've teased the audience enough. Let's take a trip through the dealings of Nick Naylor. What is this film about?
This film is about a tobacco lobbyist. He works for Big Tobacco, and it is his job to not necessarily convince people that cigarettes aren't bad, but to distract them from the fact that they are.
Right.
And he does it very well. And in rewatching this movie, I was dying laughing throughout it, but it starts so strong, where he goes on the Sally Jessy Raphael type show, has to argue with a kid with cancer who's up there, no hair, talking about stopping smoking. and one of the great lines, it would be bad business for us to kill this kid. It would be better business for us to keep him alive and smoking. And then he immediately flips on the guy that's fighting and working for the senator's office, talking about how bad smoking is and how bad the tobacco industry is, and says, this guy wants this kid to die so that he gets a bigger budget to keep fighting for these things. Right. So he just, out the gate, flips everything on its head, and it's amazing. And everyone there goes, oh, okay, and kind of sees his point.
Even almost like convinces the guy that's the senator lobbyist, because that's the thing, is the good guy, the air quotes good guys are sending their own lobbyists, and they have their own agendas. So they're like, there is no good and there is no bad, which is, I think, perfectly captured from Jason Reitman putting that on display, because everyone has an agenda in power, right? And that was so prevalent later on when that same guy is being ridiculed by the senator, played by William H. Macy. He says one of my favorite lines of the whole movie is, "Where the hell did you find cancer, boy?" And then he goes on this horrible list of things. He's like, if you're gonna find someone, a terminally ill child, you want him like with no hope at all, like carrying around a goldfish. It's just,
right, in a wheelchair. Zero hope.
Zero hope.
It's one of the great things in this movie, because again, there's no good guys and there's no bad guys. It's just showing how everybody's using terrible things to further their own agendas.
Mm-hmm. I want to back up a little bit, because yes, we start out at that Sally Jessy-esque type talk show, but just the opening credits in this has the most like deep earwig song on the face of the planet. It's that smoke, smoke, smoke the cigarette, puff, puff, and it's just like, I remember, like, I was just watching this the other day in prep for this, and I'm like, fuck, this is why I can't watch this movie a lot, because every time that happens, I dream this fucking song, I'm still singing this fucking song, and I will for weeks. Like, it just has this, like, crazy, Tremors-esque worm that buries itself into my fucking brain, and I can't get that song out of my head.
I do not get the earworm part of the song, but it is a great song, and I need to find out if it was an actual song or if it was a song that was written for the movie.
It is an actual song. I
kind of figured.
I will, tell you that right now. It's the same thing. Like, I had this, and this is just my shit, but I had the same problem when I used to play, like, Fallout New Vegas all the time. It would play over and over again. And I was just like, oh my God. And then I'd just be singing it, and I would be driving my family crazy, singing this, like, I hate country music, but it's that, like, weird, like, pre-Western.
It's older country music that is a completely different thing from modern pop country music.
Yes. And it's the perfect rhythm, it's the perfect lyrics to this, and I'm just like, oh God, it's still there. So we get introduced to Nick Naylor. He kind of sets it up, and again, this over-stylized thing, how great of a lobbyist he is, how he's a spinner of truth and all this stuff. But then we do have to humanize Mr. Naylor a little bit, and that's when we're introduced to his family.
The first introduction to his son, and this was another scene that I love, because his son is there, and I didn't hear exactly what his son said, but it's along the lines of, like, don't embarrass me, kind of.
Don't ruin my life, yeah.
Right, because it's like, bring your parent to work day, or what do you do day at school? So he's got to go up and explain what he does to this classroom full of children, what he does for a living. And he goes up and immediately starts spinning how cigarettes are good. And one of the little girls, and this was another line I loved, little girl raises her hand and she goes, my mommy says cigarettes are bad for you. And he goes up to her desk and he looks at her and he goes, is your mommy a doctor?
You're right.
Scientific researcher of some kind?
Right.
And the little girl goes, no. And he says, well, she doesn't exactly sound like a credible expert, does she? And he ends it with, I'm not saying that cigarettes are good or bad for you. I'm just saying you got to find out for yourself. Right. To this classroom full of kids. Teacher goes, okay. but then that has a whole trajectory of its own throughout the movie because that kid starts really embarrassed and ends up really looking up to his dad.
This movie does a perfect balancing act of keeping you invested in rooting for Nick, but also being like, what he's saying is dangerous and it sucks. Like, they're very upfront about it, where he's standing in front of the American flag, like lighting a Bic lighter, and it shows his, like, the death toll that he's responsible for on the bottom in a ticker. But then, like, when he, like you said, in that scene where he's talking to the children, where he's just like, is your mom doesn't sound like a reliable source or whatever, but then he's just like, but you should listen to your parents, and you should, like, he's just so likable that even, like, you're just like, oh god, he's such an asshole. But and right when you're about to give up on him as a character, as far as rooting for him, he says something and it talks you into be like, oh, but he's got a heart of gold.
Yeah, he's such a piece of shit, but you just love him.
Yeah,
you can't help but he's just so likable.
He runs a lot of parallels to, like, Fletcher Reed from Liar Liar, where, again, a likable person, and in that role it's Jim Carrey, so he's just doing Jim Carrey things, and so it's just, like, super entertaining. But this, you kind of buy Aaron Eckhart's heart, and I have to give him all the credit in the world, because he no pun intended, but he nails it. He nails the role. That is basically the main crux of the entire plot, is his interactions between, professionally, and the effects that takes on his interactions with his son, because whatever reason he decides it's a good idea for his son to start seeing what his father does, so he's taking him on all these professional excursions, and I think little did he know it was going to have more of a transformative impact on him, even more so than his son.
Yeah, well, and he's teaching his son throughout the movie how to be this person and how to do these things. And his son really picks up on it. So by the end of the movie, his son is flipping the script on him and spinning things to him to convince him to do something. And we'll get into that. One small detail I noticed this time around, and I feel like it had to be intentional. The name of the school was Euthanasia.
Oh!
So it's called the Euthanasia School.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I did not pick that up. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that had to be intentional.
It's funny, too, because it seems like on this particular stretch of time where he's just like, oh, I want my son to go with me, it seems like that's when all, like, the movie level stuff kind of happens to him, where it's just like, oh, we have to go pay off the original Marlboro Man, and we have to fly to LA and pitch cigarettes in a movie and all this stuff. So that always seemed a little movie-ish to me, just like the series of events that happens. It's like, oh, I'm going to choose this time to have my kid follow me. He's going to see all these, like, crazy cartoon character people. But, again, I'm not going to give it too much shit, because it's still done in a satirical way, and it's still funny.
It's done very well when his son is introduced to all of these people, despite how ridiculous and cartoony some of them may be. They are in Hollywood, so some of these people might very well exist.
Very, very much so. I think an unsung character of this entire film is Adam Brody's, like, assistant when they get to LA to pitch cigarettes in cinema. Just them waiting in the waiting room, and it's just like this super clean, like, Asian aesthetic, very almost like minimalistic, but still super, like, polished marble and, like, excess. And you see there's just like a jumbotron in the waiting room, and it's like killer whales eating seals and stuff for, like, intimidation factor. You have, like, a little Japanese man raking sand for absolutely no reason
that he hollers at. Rake that sand, it's not going to rake itself.
He goes and he like points out all the koi fish that, like, and how much money each one costs.
Right. This one's a gift from Oprah, 13 grand.
Let's talk about the cast a little bit. And you have to start, we already said how great Aaron Eckhart did in this. And I think he is like, because of this film, I think this is the role that got him Harvey Dent in Dark Knight. Because I think they're the same role. So I think that he was the perfect person to play Harvey Dent, and because of this role, because he showed what he could do here. He has that politician thing just down to a science. But let's talk a little bit about his lackeys, which are equally like such a fun little group of characters and great acting choices. The Mod Squads,
Right.
the Merchants of Death.
It is the lobbyists for himself, tobacco, firearms, and alcohol. And then they all get together and compare stories about how they spun things, how they're going to go after, how they're going to spin things. The alcohol lobbyist says that she has to do an interview and she has to fight the Mothers Against Fetal Alcohol Syndrome or something. And so they're having this whole discussion about how they're going to spin fetal alcohol syndrome into something positive. David Koechner character says, oh, well, maybe you could hug the kids. And she says, well, they're not going to let me hug the kids. And they're not going to let me anywhere near the kids.
Yeah.
Who's doing the interview? And she goes, Diane Sawyer. And oh, you're fucked because she's going to hug the kids.
Right.
So
And they'll let
it's
her.
really,
Yeah.
it's really just a glimpse into their mindsets about how to spin things and how to make things look positive when they're fighting they're fighting death. They're fighting fetal alcohol syndrome.
They basically just are there to eat lunch and argue who warrants more vigilante justice. And they get real butthurt when, Nick's just he breaks down all of their numbers and he's just the gun guy doesn't even scratch the surface. Okay,
Right.
The alcohol lady does okay, but I am responsible for basically cancer level fatalities. And they get all and he's all right,
Yeah.
you guys would be, you guys warrant vigilante justice. It's fine.
It's okay. Your guys' awful things kill some people too.
Right.
Just mine kills the most. So people want to come after me even more than you because I kill more people. And that's like a badge of honor.
Right. And Maria Bello plays the alcohol lobbyist, which is great. She does really good in this because you think Maria Bello, she's not usually known for comedic roles, or she's not cast in comedies usually. She's more of a dramatic actress, but she brings she keeps up with the good timing and the right amount of non-self-awareness and dryness. David Koechner is a little bit more over the top, but that is if you cast David Koechner, he plays a very specific role. He's a little bit more toned down, but you needed someone a little bit more kooky because Aaron Eckhart and Maria Bello were just a little bit they were very dry, so you needed someone to kind of elevate that a little bit.
Right. Well, and it works as a more cartoony character considering that he is the gun lobbyist, right? And he's all about America, so much so that at the end they show him eating a piece of apple pie with American cheese on it.
With a flag.
And Nick Naylor goes, that's disgusting. He goes, it's American.
Yeah.
So just considering he was the gun lobbyist, I think that it was well cast to do someone really cartoony in that role.
Sure.
And he's the same thing in every movie you put him in, but he's always cast with intention.
100%. You have, I think, the probably most underrated performance in this entire movie is William H. Macy as Senator Finistirre or whatever. I love his introduction. He's doing a press conference, and this is one of my favorite shots of the entire film because he's standing in front of a podium, but the podium has diamond lungs with rays of sunshine on it, and it looks like money because you're just this is your good guy. This is going to be the MacGuffin, but on the right side of things. Obviously, you want to root for someone that's going against smoking cigarettes because that makes sense. That's going to, save lives and stuff. But it just shows how disgustingly grimy it is. Even down to the details of the insignia of the lungs that are just clean and pristine, and they're literally lung level where his lungs would be. That's one of my favorite introductions of a character is just there to be as grimy, if not more grimy, than Nick Naylor and the cited Big Tobacco. The Senate hearing at the end, where he feels like he gets Nick in on the ropes. He corners Nick after he's lost everything.
Oh yeah, and Nick gets back at him. I really love just the quick shot they have when they show him sitting in his office. And they shoot him, his face in the office, and then they shoot under his desk, and he's wearing the Birkenstocks and socks,
yeah,
just to show you who you're dealing with as a senator. This hippie granola, anti-smoking, whatever type guy, who also is just a giant piece of shit and tries to utilize tragedy to forward his own goals.
Yeah, and I love at the end where it shows that his arc, like Naylor goes on an actual arc and he learns something. He's transformed by the end of the movie, but it shows William H. Macy's character on like the Sunday news cycle he's doing, and you're gonna take smoking like cigarettes completely out of all the old movies, like all the old classics, and it's showing them like Humphrey Bogart like licking a lollipop and smoking a cigarette and shit. He's just like, well, yeah, it's so he's learned absolutely nothing. He was trying to George Lucas shit, but instead of adding shitty CGI that was still like mid 90s and not ready, not even worth it, he's adding lollipops and like Slim Jims,
cigarettes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
just awful.
In his office, doesn't he have like a big wedge of cheese behind his?
I didn't notice.
Something
possibly.
Yeah, because he's in Vermont, so like that even comes up later in the Senate hearing, where he's just like, how do you have any room to talk? You are like the pusher of cheese, and then
right.
he goes. Nick Naylor, like the great state of Vermont will not apologize for its cheese.
Right. Well, and he spins it and he says that, cheese causes cholesterol, which kills more Americans than like anything every year.
But he's right. Like, and that's what makes it believable. Like even the performance believable, because everything he says has it's bullshit, but it's like informed bullshit.
Right. It has some merit. He's done all of his homework. He knows all of his stuff ahead of time. He goes against a couple of the other senators and is like talking about Ford motor cars killing people. And he mentions that to the senator of Detroit. There's another one he mentioned, but he's so well informed in all of these things. And he just diverts the argument to something else so that people can't speak.
Right. And it's a perfect example when he's at the fair with his own son, and he's just like, here's the argument. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? The son says chocolate, and then, Nick says vanilla, and then they start talking, and he's just like, he throws that out there, and he's like, people deserve a choice. Like, you don't need chocolate or vanilla. You need this and this. And it just, like, watching this movie made me really worried, or actually it made me really thankful that some of like the dirtiest politicians in real life haven't taken note of Nick Naylor, haven't like watched this film, because everyone nowadays in politics just like it's so unabashedly in your face, like what position you are in, where Nick is just like, you should be rooting against him, but he does it in such a way that it's just like, oh, I could change my own morals and my own, things about it, because he's coming at me with not only facts, but it's oozing with charisma also. So thank God that like real bad actors, politicians haven't watched this film.
Yeah, but to be fair, he's not a politician. He's a lobbyist.
Sure.
Our politicians wear their intentions on their sleeves 100%, which is to stay elected and say whatever the hell they need to say to keep that up. But what are the lobbyists doing that are talking to the politicians, that are keeping corporations in business, that are keeping cigarettes and keeping oil and keeping all these other things? There's got to be some real dirty shit going on, because we know, how terrible alcohol.
Cheers.
And cheers. And cigarettes, we know the terrors of some of these things and whatever other things, pharmaceuticals that are pushed, but yet there's still people out there talking to politicians and lining politicians' pockets and keeping all these things readily available to the public. So those have to be some really persuasive people.
Let's talk. The last like major character I want to just touch on real quick is Katie Holmes' character. She plays like the young up and coming beat reporter that I think this is, if I were to give story wise the movie a little bit of shit, I think it would be here, just because like Nick is like infallible, right? Like he is just on top of his game. Like he is Satan basically. Like there's no throwing him curveballs because he will knock everything out of the park. But it really just takes like a pretty reporter that I'm sure like someone in his position would have like probably hundreds falling at him, like doing this all the time to him, like getting to get that juicy story. And he, like, even with the mod squad, like they totally call it out like beforehand. They're just like, just do not have sex with, like, don't sleep with her, because that's when, you know, you're going to be Captain Loose Lips and you're going to, you know, spill all the trade secrets, not about just yourself and cigarettes, but about, you know, everything, us included. And he's like, oh no, you know, and his response is understandable, where he's just like, no, I've been here before type deal. But then he just does literally that. Like she just bats her eyes. And, you know, Katie Holmes, I used to have a Katie Holmes shrine on my wall, but it's just like, you're going to throw it all away on, you know, Katie Holmes. Like, I don't know, that's just where the story portion of it kind of fell apart a little bit for me.
Right, but they fixed it with one line of dialogue at the end, right? Which is the son comes in and he said, Mom said that she thinks you have dependency issues and it was only a matter of time before you throw everything away for some tramp. That's funny just because they use that line like when he's talking to the Hollywood agent about, well, wouldn't, you know, if people are smoking in space, wouldn't they blow up the space station?
Right.
And he goes, yeah, but that can be fixed with one line of dialogue. Thank God we invented the blah, blah, blah machine.
Right.
So we can smoke.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like even since this movie was so self-aware that it would have dodged that landmine, I did like, it set up another one of my favorite quotes from the movie, and that was from Maria Bello, and she just looks at him and she goes, how about it, Nick? Are you a tit man? It's such
Apparently it was. I do understand what you're saying, because someone that has that kind of awareness and that ability to spin should be able to play the game and recognize things for what they were, and play the person, you know, play the person that's trying to play them. If he's the guy that can get one over on everything, he should 100% see that coming and be able to get one over on her.
Yes. He still does it in a way like towards the end where he calls her out, and it I guess it ruins her kind of, or it just like makes an awkward moment for her. I don't know. It still felt very like, even though she kind of like, it's implied that she got her comeuppance also, it still was very, I don't know. It felt very like he wrote himself into a wall at that point. But, you know, I won't give the movie too much shit, but I want to talk about, you know, talking about how great of a cast and how great of an ensemble cast this was. Like, there was some bangers as far as ancillary actors in this, like Robert Duvall as, what was he called, the general,
the captain,
yeah. Oh man, that was such
like the head of Big Tobacco, basically.
Yeah
Who adopted Nick as like an adopted son almost.
They put a mint julep on his grave, like
right.
Which he's like the one, he's just so cool, calm, and collected. Like, he's like a duck, like all the water just kind of like brushes off his back and all that. And then just like when Nick gets attacked by the proxy Antifa, you know, type people, he's still just like, hey, the captain is here, like in the hospital bed. But he's like, no, I'm dying too. Like, even, you know, with all the spin, all the bullshit, smoking his whole life caught up to him, and his heart gave out.
Had a question in that scene, because they show like the TV screen right in front of his bed with the captain on there, and there's like, I thought we could be roommates. I want to know where the camera was in Nick's room that was showing the captain Nick.
Sure.
Because in 05, I mean, it's a dumb detail, but in 05, the technology wasn't quite where it was yet, that there might have just been a camera in the TV that, you know, allowed them to see each other.
Hey man, look at you breaking down film. I didn't even pick that up. Maybe there's a built-in shitty webcam on the monitor. I don't know. And of course it's Big Tobacco, so it's like a big screen, right? It's like a 50-inch.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. It's just the detail I noticed.
I loved it. We mentioned J.K. Simmons, and it's, at this particular time, this is pre-Whiplash, and I know you said you haven't seen Whiplash yet, but this is pre-Whiplash J.K. Simmons, so he was still always cast as man yelling, and and this was no different. But I mean, once they kind of and I mean, even in Whiplash, he's just man yelling in bigger part, But he was just so perfect as just pissed off boss in this. Adam Brody, like we talked about, but Sam Elliott, he again with the timing, like he's Sam Elliott is a dramatic actor, but you think of like him in Big Lebowski or something. This was like a Big Lebowski type cameo from Sam Elliott, and he killed it in this.
And it isn't your standard comedy. I mean, as you stated, it's a black comedy. So it is funny, but it's not silly. It's a very smart movie. I mean, and who better to cast as the Marlboro Man?
Man, right?
Really.
Nick having to do these things in his life, dealing with everything professionally and personally with his son, and it all culminates in that big moment in the Senate hearing, which you like so much, right?
Right. In the hearing, when the senator asks, what about when your son turns 18? Are you going to encourage him to smoke? And he stops and he thinks about it for a minute. And then he says, if my son wants a cigarette on his 18th birthday, I'll buy him his first pack. And he just doubles, triples, quadruples down on who his character has been through the whole movie. He really goes for it, because even with his son and his son's life potentially on the line when it comes to smoking, he still says, you know what, it's about free choice, which is kind of his argument through all of it. People should have the right to choose. And he goes, I'll buy his pack if that's what he wants.
The beautiful thing about that is, in a lesser movie, the senator's message would ring out, even though it's just like, his methods of getting to this point were gross and slimy, but he's right. He should be putting these giant skull and crossbones on every pack of cigarettes and all these things. But the fact that Jason Reitman allowed, even if it's in the book, because I have to confess, I didn't read the novel. I didn't read the novel that this is adapted from. But like you said, the apex of his character, his big aha moment was not smoking's bad, but I need to trust my convictions. And I'm so glad. Oh my God, there was an alternate ending where when he goes, after the Senate hearing, he goes outside and then his son lights up a cigarette, and it was supposed to be that big impactful moment because that was supposed to be the only time that you see someone smoking on screen. And then he smacks it out of his hand, and it was basically denouncing, smoking cigarettes and all this stuff. But it was like this aha moment on Nick Naylor. Fuck, I'm so glad that they did not go with that ending, and they just went for him quitting Big Tobacco, because fuck Big Tobacco, because morally they just turned their back on him, even though the captain's just like, Big Tobacco takes care of their own, and they fired him at the first sign of controversy, and they just kind of moved on. And it wasn't until he went on the biggest stage in America and was just like, made tobacco look good unintentionally. He was just doing that for himself, not so much for an endorsement on the company. But then, when he goes out and then he's just like, you know what, I'm just going to go be a lobbyist at something else. That was still kind of shitty. I think it was like, cell phone? He's like... Cell phones, yeah. So, I am so fucking glad that Jason Reitman felt empowered enough to go and really drive the correct point home in this film with his first feature. That's what sets this film apart from its peers, which I can't think of many peers. Like I said, Burn After Reading is kind of runs on the same train tracks, but for the most part, this is a truly unique black comedy.
there's really no other movie like it, and I think that's one of the reasons I love it so much, because I hate when things are completely predictable. It's not like this one has twists and turns like it's unpredictable,
right.
But it's just that whole scumbag aspect of it that keeps driving it the whole way. And again, just the fact that you can't help but like him. You can't help but dislike the senator who's fighting to get cigarettes, to get this label on cigarette. Like, he's fighting for what should be good. And you really dislike him.
What do you think the legacy is? Because like I said, I think it does have a life after the theatrical release, but I feel like it's kind of small. And I feel like it's already kind of hit the ceiling where it's hit as far as a cult following goes. Like, people are just like, oh wow, everyone saw the DVD, and then they just kind of stopped talking about it. You can't find this film is devoid of reviews on YouTube and other things. What do you think the legacy is now, and why do you think people just kind of moved on from it?
I think that this movie and what it's representing and the way that the guy is probably, in society as it stands today, probably triggers people, and they don't want to see that, and they don't want to see someone, like, people don't want to be told anything anymore that they don't stand behind.
Have like an educated argument.
Yeah, I think that people don't want to see someone that can fight and argue. I think that people only want to stand behind their own political beliefs in this day and age, and they think that anyone else's political beliefs are wrong. So when you have a movie like this that's really parodying real life,
it's really gray.
Yeah, and I don't think that people can handle that anymore. If you go on social media and look at people arguing, with each other 100% because you just have a different belief than me, I just don't think that it's something that people can tolerate anymore. And that's really what this movie is. It's a parody of real life, of the political system, and of lobbyists that has some truth to it. But I don't think people want to face that truth because they're all stuck in their own little echo chambers now. And this might tilt the boat or rock the boat of what they want to believe.
I think it's a love song to how things used to be and how things can be again. Maybe at the end of this year. We'll just leave it at that. You said it is a parody of what's going on. Maybe that's the problem. Almost like what, when we covered Idiocracy, where it's so on the nose with what's going on in 2016 to 2020 that we can't sit back and laugh at it or enjoy it. And I get that. So maybe it's going to take this current living nightmare to be over to finally really realize that, oh, we can have these conversations and not tell the other person to go jump off a cliff. Will that ever come back? Are we permanently damaged? I don't know. That's a question for another time. However, just as a film, Thank You for Smoking is something that I would recommend literally everyone to go see, because it is such a well-crafted film. It is so funny. It is so fast-paced. Like I said, it's Aaron Sorkin type dialogue, but in a comedy that is very relevant, and it just kind of peels back the veneer of a lot of things that are going on, and it's fun to kind of not only laugh at it, but just see it in a way where you get to see the makeup off on all sides, and it's so unique. This is a movie that just, like I said, doesn't really have things like it. It doesn't really have peers because it's so unique. So I told you that this movie is just like seriously for everyone. Coleman, who do you think this movie's for?
So I think this movie is great for future lawyers, lobbyists, and anyone that likes a good debate. Any kids, high school kids that are looking to go to debate team might learn a lot from this movie. This is one of the reasons I love this movie so much, because I personally love debating people. And so watching this movie, I saw a lot of my own manipulative tactics in debating people and in changing a conversation to something else and twisting people up in their own words so that they don't even know what to do. So yeah, I think this movie is just great for anybody that likes a good debate for whatever reason.
So go out and watch Thank You for Smoking is what we're, in a long-winded way, both Coleman and I are trying to say. But Mr. Coleman Yeti, thank you once again for coming aboard on the Cult of Films. Look into the camera, tell everyone where to find you and what you're up to.
You can find me at Coleman Yeti on Instagram, at Coleman Yeti on Twitter. Check me out on my friend's page, Two Bananas Adventures and Gear on YouTube. I don't make many appearances, but he talks about me a whole lot and uses my stuff, so that's great. And you can find me right here on Cult of Films every once in a while with Mr. Jon Dunning.
Perfect. Yes, you could find me at John the Host on Twitter, or if you want to follow this very show, you could go to at The Cult of Films, all in lowercase. We will be uploading this to all your favorite podcasting sites, as well as the YouTube video on, your Spotify's, your iTunes. Leave us apples and oranges, cigarettes and beer, whatever you want to leave us. We'll take it all because we're poor YouTubers and we'll literally consume anything you send us. But until next time, I usually ask the guest to kind of give us a whatever movie we're talking about themed outro, but I'm just gonna play the damn song.
Smoke, smoke, smoke that cigarette. Puff, 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 and if you smoke yourself to death, tell St. Peter at the Golden Gate that you hates to make him wait, but you just gotta have another cigarette.